the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security, a member of the Donald Trump administration, Tricia McLaughlin. Tricia, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So you mentioned the number of arrests that have been made, 700,000. That's a lot of people. I think when President Trump was elected, his base really, I mean, this is reflected in the polls. The majority of the American people, not just Republicans, not just Trump voters, Democrats too, centrists, independents, everyone supports the deportation, especially of criminal aliens, trust the Republican Party on this. But I think there was an expectation of deportations happening at a significantly faster rate than we saw in previous administrations. Under Clinton, there were over 12 million. And I know it's removals plus returns, which is sort of the formal plus the informal. Same with Bush, 10 million removals plus returns. Obama, 5 million removals plus returns. Biden, 4 million. What has been DHS's barrier? What's been the barrier to being able to deport people at a faster rate than these previous administrations?
Well, President Trump and Secretary Noem inherited a incredibly broken ICE. Quite frankly, those officers have been hamstrung for 4 years. Some of them were working from home instead of actually being in the field and doing their job, which is pretty remarkable given that these are law enforcement officers and they're working from home. It really makes no sense. But I do think that that funding from that one big, beautiful bill, that made us able to increase the workforce 120%. So moving from 10,000 ICE enforcement officers to 22,000. So we do expect to really speed up those deportation numbers. But I mean, I think the key piece to this as well, and I mentioned it before, is those self-deportations. So we've seen 3.1 million exits of criminal illegal aliens from this country. That includes the 700,000 that ICE and CBP deported, but that also includes the 2 million plus that have self-deported. It is so much less expensive and so much safer for people who are in this country illegally to just leave now. And so that's something we're really encouraging. Of course, we're going to keep turbocharging and increasing those number of arrests. But we want people to get the message, you need to leave now or you will be arrested.
Yeah, and I think if I recall correctly, Trump advisor Stephen Miller had said that the goal was to eclipse in this first year of the Trump administration, Obama's first year, which was done. ICE deported 475,000 migrants in Trump's first year. So they did reach that goal. I think my question stems more from there's a lot of subversion that's happening, obviously, in our institutions, whether it's, judges, whether it's even Congress, not appropriating the proper resources. And I think the American people want to know, like, okay, what can help expedite this? Who is trying to stop this? And what are they doing if they're being effective in slowing it down that's being effective to do that?
Yeah, I think you have an out-of-control judicial branch that's happening. The number of activists, really lawless judges that we've seen. I mean, you look at the case out of Eswatini, we deported 12 violent, awful criminals. I mean, we're talking about multiple murderers, multiple strong-arm rapists, the worst, truly the definition, Liz, of worst of the worst. And there was a judge out of Massachusetts who blocked that and kept them in from trying to bring them back into the United States. So that's something we're dealing with over and over again. I mean, you even look at the case of the 5-year-old that has gotten a ton of attention. His father abandoned him, and then his mother went to take custody of the child. And then the father chose to bring him and the child back to the detention facility at Dilley in Texas. And then this activist judge ordered them released. Even though they had final deportation orders. That is completely lawless. How do you let that happen in this country? The president has to be able to run the country according to the rule of law, and he's totally usurping the U.S. Constitution with this kind of ruling.
Yeah, the judges and the resources were going to be if I had to make a list of what was the barrier, those would be the two things. And by the way, the number from the Obama year was actually 2014, not his first year in term.
Okay.
Let me ask you about the shootings that have happened in Minnesota, specifically Renee Good and Alex Preddy. One of the things that we did on this show immediately following both of those shootings is, while we are on the side of ICE and Border Patrol and mass deportations and law and order in general, we don't assume that one person's in the right or wrong. We analyze each situation individually to see if lethal force is justified. We spent hours and hours going through these footage frame by frame, looking at all the contextual information. And we ultimately came to the conclusion that, specifically in the case of Alex Preddy, although this is also true of Renee Good, that the officer was justified because Alex Preddy was violently resisting arrest and ultimately reached for his holster, seemingly not knowing that he had been disarmed. I wonder, from the perspective of the Department of Homeland Security, when you are, I assume, doing the same thing, analyzing all the contextual information, watching these videos frame by frame, talking to the officers involved, have you seen any indication or information, any evidence that the officers did anything incorrectly or wrong? Or does DHS stand by the officers who ultimately shot Alex Preddy?
Yeah, well, we want to make sure that the facts come forth. I'm glad you've done your research and analysis. It's great to hear that. FBI is leading this investigation with the support of Homeland Security investigators, and then CBP, in the case of Alex Preddy, is doing a separate investigation. I mean, I think, Liz, what's really important here is that this wasn't a protest. This was an active federal law enforcement operation. Our officers on the ground that day were conducting an operation and trying to arrest a criminal illegal alien who had a past conviction for assault and domestic violence. So this wasn't protest. This wasn't free speech. This was an individual who got in a physical altercation. He was obstructing federal law enforcement, which is a federal crime and a felony. And unfortunately, in those cases, there are dangerous and, in this case, deadly consequences. So we'll continue to follow the facts and see what the FBI finds out. But it's just a reminder to everyone, if you are protesting, of course, you have your First Amendment rights. Those are precious, but you do not have the right to get in a physical altercation armed with law enforcement. You don't have the right to obstruct a federal law enforcement operation. That is a felony.
And when do you expect the conclusion of that FBI investigation into this?
I can't get ahead of the FBI, but I anticipate in the next couple of weeks.
In the next couple of weeks, and we'll be interested to see their findings as well.
Yeah.
Let's stay in Minnesota for just a second. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, it has been reported that she, of course, is a naturalized American citizen. She was not born here in the United States. She obtained citizenship because her father claimed asylum. Yet there's been recent reporting that her father, Ilhan Omar's father's asylum claim was potentially fraudulent because he claimed asylum on the basis that he was fearing for his life, he said, because the violent Marxist Siad Barre regime in Somalia, he said, was going to kill him. The reality, it's been reported recently, is that was a lie. He was actually a part of that regime. He was a high-ranking military official, a colonel, probably specializing in propaganda, and that he did not disclose his association with the Siad Barre regime to American authorities before he claimed asylum. The reason he was most likely fearing for his life is because the people of Somalia had overthrown that violent regime and were holding accountable the officials that had abused their power while part of it, him being one of those officials. And I wonder if the Department of Homeland Security is aware of this potential asylum fraud on the part of Ilhan Omar's father that ended up begetting her ability to be a naturalized citizen.
Yeah, we're certainly aware of this, and it's something that has been looked into. Under U.S. law, the grounds for denaturalization is if citizenship was procured on the basis of fraud. It's very much a case-by-case basis, but that's something, of course, the president has truthed quite a bit about this, and that's something that people are looking into.
Yeah, I think a while back, this was several weeks ago, Tom Homan had said that DHS was looking into her case, but there's various aspects of her case. There's the case of, her marriage to her brother. There's the case of some money issues. There's the case of her father. And it seems to me if her father had committed fraud with his asylum case, and she was a minor at the time, then her naturalized citizenship would have been obtained invalidly.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what it sounds like could be the case there. Like I said, under U.S. law, if the grounds for citizenship is based on fraud, then that certainly, denaturalization is certainly a possibility. But I think you brought up a great point, Liz, which is more broadly the fraud that we've seen out of Minneapolis, out of the Somali community. Of course, that $9 billion that was found from the FBI is just the tip of the iceberg. And that was really part of the first part of the story of Minneapolis, is that we found, or we placed 200 plus Homeland Security investigators on the ground to be researching that fraud, finding leads, going door to door, and getting to the bottom of this and getting accountability for the American taxpayer. And that's when we did surge those law enforcement officers. And I think that Tim Walsh, this has really been a great distraction for him from his culpability in these fraud schemes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the eyes of not just the country, the eyes of the world are on Minneapolis. And we all hope to see justice served there. Let me ask you one more question.
Yeah.
We had investigative journalist Peter Schweizer on the show last week, and his reporting is phenomenal, of course. But one of the things that he talked about with us that he revealed on our show has gotten millions and millions of views since he said this, because many people are not aware of this. Peter Schweizer was talking about this scam, essentially this plot that China runs, where billionaires in China send their wives here to the United States to give birth, the birth tourism, the anchor babies. Those babies then have U.S. citizenship because they were born here in the United States. They're taken back to China after they have obtained U.S. citizenship. There's an additional aspect to this. Peter was telling us that there's a surrogacy scam where these billionaires will actually pay American women to carry their children, sometimes, dozens of children. And then again, born on American soil, they obtain U.S. citizenship. They're taken back to China, indoctrinated into Chinese communists. And then when they turn 18, they are redeployed here to the United States as American voters. And the combination of the birth tourism and the surrogacy, Schweitzer told us, has happened in the last 13 years, 1 million times. So as this plot ripens, there will soon, sometime in the next decade, be 1 million Chinese communist voters who are technically American citizens who are allowed to essentially take over our elections. I mean, 1 million votes, of course, it is conclusive in the outcome of the elections. And I wonder if DHS is aware of this and what steps are being taken to address it.
Yeah, this is something that I just read in the reporting. I'll have to get back to you, Liz, on what extent USCIS and Homeland Security investigators are aware of this and what steps are being taken. But to the more broad point, temporary protected status, CHNV, which is another parole program, the asylum programs more broadly, we have seen a mass amount of fraud and exploitation and people who are counter to U.S. interests coming into our country by those means. So including this system and this that you're talking about, it is incredibly concerning, and it underscores the fact that not just the Biden administration, but for administrations for decades, we've seen that there's been a total loss of integrity to our immigration system. And that's why President Trump and Secretary Noem have taken major steps to make sure we're stopping these kind of parole programs and we're stopping these kind of schemes from exploiting our country and our systems.
Yeah, because I think it's just shocking sometimes when people realize there's another plot that they weren't aware of. Last question for you. The error rate under the Trump administration, many people don't know this, is actually much lower when it comes to the deportations that have happened than previous administrations. For example, Obama's Department of Homeland Security had much higher rates of errors in deportations than Trump. The mainstream media, of course, doesn't want you to know about this. The left doesn't care about the truth here. And I wonder, just in a practical sense, how do you pull this off when you're conducting these deportations in such a hostile environment, which, of course, as you mentioned, there's the coordinated Marxist groups that are trying to thwart law enforcement. There's mainstream media lies. Like, the whole thing is hostile. How do you pull off a lower error rate?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's something we're working toward every day. Our law enforcement officers know that they're under a microscope, that they are facing a highly coordinated campaign of violence against them, and we've really refashioned our training so that de-escalation tactics, conflict management, all of those are used, and that we're making sure that we are targeting the right individuals. And so when people talk, about broad sweeps, we are using intelligence that we've collected for years and years from Homeland Security investigators. CBP uses this data, ICE does too, to go after individuals and target them. And there are collateral situations, of course. If you're in the country illegally, you are on the table, and we'll continue to do just that and deliver those mass deportations that President Trump was elected upon.
Yeah, and I think the Trump administration doesn't get credit for that because in a hostile environment, it's hard not to make errors, and their error rate is lower than previous administrations. Listen, Tricia, we could talk to you all day. There's so much of this to talk about. I know you have to go. Thank you for being on the show. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Of course. Our movement is gaining ground. People around us are waking up. The mainstream media leftist narrative is cracking. At Blaze TV, we've built a home for some of the strongest, smartest voices in conservative media. When you subscribe to Blaze TV, you're not just watching content, you're supporting a movement. You're backing creators who think for themselves. It's everything that the networks won't show you, delivered on your terms on any device, anytime. And it starts at just $8 a month. BlazeTV.com/Liz, promo code Liz.